We're gonna start the meeting. Sasha's gonna be a few minutes late, like everybody who's driving from anywhere. Traffic was bad tonight. So, we have two, good point, silence.
Phone's off.
Silence, okay.
We have two members of our government who are here to give a presentation on the five-year financial forecast, as well as our keepsake public attendee.
Honorary.
Right?
I just gave him the schedule for the next meeting. Why not?
I should try to.
So Andrew, I'll just preface your five-year forecast saying, that's the same old thing, 2 or 3 years in a row, he shows all his red, don't worry about it kind of statement. And this year you threw a curveball at me.
It's close.
Yeah, it's close. So, what can you tell us about your five-year forecast?
Well, for those who don't know me, I've met some of the gentlemen. I'm Maylor, town manager here. I appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to you. The forecast, again, it really does in many ways hold a fairly consistent sort of methodology, which is to say that we're reasonably close to doing, to getting where we need in the current year, and then as we get further away from the current year, we obviously get a little more consistent about everything from revenue estimates to cost estimates as well. And so as you look typically to the fifth year, you end up in a number that looks pretty scary, right? And part of that is not, is really intended to understand that you get conservative as you get further out. And they're real percentages, so it's not as if we make those up. It's not as if we're assuming 20% increase in salary as an example. It's the nature of how most budgeting is done, private sector or public sector, is that the further you get away from this current year, the more conservative you want to be about those estimates. And it also goes a little bit to certainly North Andover's governmental funding, which is that we have done well in sort of incrementally increasing the budget and service levels. But we, it's called the science of muddling through, right? We're a little bit incrementalist by style. We have to be, because we don't add a substantial amount of new revenue every year. We add the tax increase largely, and some other smaller increases. And so, as Tim knows from sitting on the Revenue and Fixed Cost Review Committee along with Liz, we really look for 5-year averages before we start to change revenue sources. We don't look for 1-year anomalies to do that. There are certain larger revenue sources, for instance, building permits, a reasonable revenue source, that we're not looking at 1-year construction to determine whether the next year should be up, because oftentimes we have, maybe 6 to 8 months notice on a fairly large construction project, sometimes longer, but we don't know when the next one's coming. So we can't assume that because we received $300,000 or $400,000 or $500,000 building permit on a fairly large scale development, that 3 years from now we're going to get another one. And so we don't account for those. Part of the reason you end up with the kind of deficit estimates later in the process, because maybe we're consistent and we're doing that, but we try to remove from revenue estimates any, if not anomalies, those things that we can't be certain about. And so as things start to crystallize, we get close to the end of the year, some of those, close to the 5 years, those revenue estimates become clearer, revenue goes up, and we're able to close that gap more often than not.
Okay. Yeah. So, interesting, but on average, what is the percentage increase in the operating cost, for example, over a 5-year period?
We've been averaging a little ahead of the norm. If you talk about the last 5-year period, I'd say 3.5% to 4%.
And what was in your forecast projections?
Well, it varies by department, so I'm averaging about 3.5% for the largest department. So the largest departments historically will certainly have greater needs. Police, fire, schools, public works is what I would call larger departments. Smaller departments, everything from accounting to my office to Eric's office, typically don't have much change either in staffing or baseline costs. So those may increase on average about 3%. And the larger departments, again, police and fire likely sometimes driven by overtime in some of the departments and other costs. And then a conscious effort to try to fund the schools to reduce classroom sizes, especially at the elementary level, has pushed those to 3.5% to 4%. So in the projection, it's 3.65 for the schools in fiscal 19, 3.5% for the balance of the 5 years. Will it be 3.5% or 3.4 or 4? I think every year we'll sort of figure it out. But the DPW and police and fire have been 3.5, and everything else is 3.
So the revenue stream, the revenue growth rather, isn't keeping pace with those costs, even though those costs are in the neighborhood of 3 to 4%. I mean, if you go in red, by year 5, the tier tells me that one slope's going up and one slope's going down.
Well, but that's a projection, right? So again, it doesn't, if I'm taking revenues up at consistent levels, expenses up at consistent levels, the other things we didn't talk about outside of core operating costs is costs like retirement and costs like health insurance, which historically has grown faster than most other costs, employee benefit costs. And when you do that, right, and then you assume fairly aggressive increases in operating budgets, you're gonna create that deficit. So again, I think it's made to understand our fundamentals, but it isn't necessarily indicative of the fact that if we kept on the pace that's in the assumptions, that we'd end up with $4 million deficit. Because you can look back 5 years and find out we haven't.
Oh, yeah.
For instance, on local receipts, just to
Yeah.
see that, we're gonna look at it and say that it's gonna be 3.55% in fiscal year 19 and 3% thereafter. So, do we have numbers on the actual? Sure. The actuals. So we could look at the actual, local receipts, of course we do, and we can see that trend. So we can do that. So actually, in forecasting the 3%, you're really saying, well, do you expect a similar increase later on, after fiscal 19? You expect a similar increase later on, but you're gonna call it 3%. Because you're better off understating it.
Absolutely.
So it's really understated projections in the future
The only-
for that.
The only thing I would add to that, so one thing that the Revenue Fixed Cost Review Committee does, which is 2 members of the school department, 2 members of this group, the finance director advising me as to revenue estimates, is the finance director provides that group with about a 15-year rolling average. So we're looking back some time, and her recommendations to the committee typically are based on a 3 to 5 year rolling average, but she has that data going back probably 20 years.
Yeah.
And so, yes is the short answer.
Mhm.
And more often than not, what you'll end up seeing is it'll go in waves. So local receipts, by and large, are motor vehicle excise taxes. This is the largest component of local receipts, and the largest single revenue source of non-property taxes, non-state aid, is motor vehicle excise tax.
The meals tax.
But it's not close. The meals tax is 1/10 of the
Yeah,
motor
yeah.
vehicle. This is motor vehicle
Yeah.
excise. So motor vehicle excise tax always tells us the story, right? Things are good, we buy cars, we hold them for less time, we buy another car. Kid needs a car, they don't borrow our car, we buy them a car. And speak of having kids at home with us, right? And so motor vehicle excise is always telling us a little bit of a story about the economy. And it is an indicator to us as to the general economy of the community. So with motor vehicle excise, as an example, we have seen a general trending up since, certainly post the Great Recession of 08 and 09, and more recently, 11 through 16, 17, 18, we've seen this increase. But we won't increase it every year. We'll hold it flat for that 5-year average, wait till there's some critical mass. This year, I think that number's going up by 300,000, right? And the reason that we have a 3.55% increase is because there was agreement to bump that up to by 300,000. Then I would expect that even if we're trending an upward trend on that, probably holding it the same for 2 or 3 years, there's a little more critical mass, and then going up, say, $300,000 again. But what I'm accounting for is the assumption that maybe we won't get there, maybe we won't grow. Yep.
Maybe we won't get there. And the new growth, I noticed is up $50,000
Yes.
from 1,000 years we've had.
What 1,000?
Yeah,
That feels like 1,000.
Okay.
So new growth, by the way, is those additions to real property taxes in addition to, so if you were replacing your kitchen and you decided that you wanted to do a $50,000 kitchen and went and got a building permit, and it's made its way through taxation, additions to your property tax, individual property tax, is a function of additions to the existing property of what we define as new growth. In the first year in which that growth is carried, it's called new growth, then it gets to the total levy, which is the total tax pie, and every year after that, it goes up in total by 2.5%. That's what new growth is. So we're seeing a general, I think you're right, it's been about 1,000 years since we've left it at the $600,000. And if we have larger developments, the real number turns out to be higher. But again, projecting those while budgeting is impossible.
So do you see people redoing their kitchens and stuff pretty much? Is that what's happening,
I would say general economic trends and building permits are up, I would say they've been fairly steady.
I think compared to last year, we're up about 200 permits.
Yep.
I
200
would say
per-
more smaller ones.
Building
Yep. Do we have figures on what the actual new growth is for
Sure.
the prior years?
Yeah, absolutely. We have 15 to 20 years of history of all of the numbers, budget and actual.
So we do have it, and we,
Yep.
spreadsheet that Lynn provides us is an Excel spreadsheet, because
It goes,
Yeah.
yeah.
It
That
just
long-
gives us a little chunk of it.
A
and
little chunk of it, yep.
last 2017, which is the last actual, is $571,000. The year before that was 631,000. Year before that was 793,000.
Ah,
So,
it's in there.
we have, our budget for 18 is 600,000. There is, as you know from sitting on the committee, the Revenue Fixed Cost Committee, proper conservatism, fiscal conservatism built into not only for the 19 recommended, but also to Andrew's forecast. I mean, we discussed, there was no argument at all. We discussed very much at length, and you weren't there for the meeting, was the building permits. My gosh, you know, we look for the last couple of years, we see these things coming down the pike. Why wouldn't you, and sort of a softball question, Andrew, why wouldn't you put that higher number at least into the forecast somehow?
Yeah, so building permits for us, we look at baseline permits again. What's the common increase in kitchens, baths, those kind of things, or standard commercial growth? If we have a building permit, for instance, Berry Farms was a substantial building permit, we're talking about it maybe 6 months before it happens, maybe 9 months. It hasn't been permitted, it hasn't been constructed. We assume the $300,000 or $400,000 building permit, it doesn't happen. Then we in turn have to find the $300,000 or $400,000 by cutting resources. Municipal government is very bifurcated in terms of revenues and expenses. And so in that case, if we end up low on a revenue estimate, we just can't take action on our own. We can't, we have to cut expenses, so we'd
If
be
you're gonna be
cutting-
wrong, it's always better to be low.
Always simple, right? And in the end of the day, if we end up high, that just ends up, you know, going to reserves or be able to allocate it in the future. But estimating that, and again, from a municipal government perspective, where we can't adjust revenue, we have to cut expense. So if we're off, we literally have to cut the expense in that year, and as simple math says, if I find out in January that my building permits are now off, I now have 6 months to make up $100,000, which means I have to make a $200,000 adjustment for 6 months to make up $100,000 delta. And more often than not, we don't know what's happening until we get further in the year. So, short of calling a town meeting to reallocate some dollars, which is never fun, we end up having to cut expenses, so let's just be conservative and see where it goes.
And
Building
then
permits-
compounding that, isn't there a highly seasonal factor to a lot of these?
Uh,
Like, for example, building
yeah.
permits?
Building permits, because we catch 2 seasons, to a certain degree, but we catch 2 seasons, we catch the fall and we catch the spring again. We certainly lose them over the winter. I think the building permit, the ones that are sort of really create some energy are the ones that are really larger commercial residential developments. We're not gonna do enough new kitchens that what we project is gonna make a difference. But if, for instance, we end up with the Berry Street or some of these larger residential projects, they can be hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of building permits, $500,000 in building permits. Merrimack is exempt from property tax, but all the work they're doing on their campus, they're subject to building permits. And so, typically we're okay seasonally, but guessing that it's gonna happen, you know, what if they delay? What if someone's doing a project, we think it's gonna happen in April to pull a building permit, and they just delay? We thought this project on 125 here was gonna begin in the fall, it's probably gonna begin in the spring. That's all in the fiscal year, but if we miss that between fiscal years, now all of a sudden we're trying to make up $300,000 or $400,000, we're probably cutting 15 people to do it.
So with all this excess, because you will have excess receipts on building permits as an example from 2016, 17, 18. If the Osgood Landing continues the development there, you'll have a lot there as well. What do you do? Where does that money go? What do you foresee? I know it's not in the forecast, but where do you foresee that money being spent as opposed to, you know, is it operating, is it capital, or?
Good question. So, and I know some of this is repeating, I've been repeating this for a few years, so
Yeah.
So from 2000 to 2010, on 2 occasions, this community had negative retained earnings. which means since its history, beginning in late 1850s, we had an aggregate net income of negative numbers, which is uncommon in Massachusetts. And I don't know if I could find another community that had two negative retained earnings balances in 2 years, probably in the Commonwealth. And based on the basic sort of financial fundamentals of the community, it makes no sense. So it basically means you had less than no money. You have negative money in aggregate. So all of the revenues and expenses over the years, which should have yielded some steady stream of some savings, right? Even $1 a year over 150 years would have been better than where you were in 2008, which was negative. And then negative again, I think it was 7 to 9 or 8 and 10. And what that, and then your bond rating was declining at the same time, not surprising. And your debt service was increasing. And so a little bit of a critical problem in terms of those. And fundamentally what it really meant was that because of relationships, this is my belief, because of relationships or the lack of relationships, the way that people solved the conflicts that existed, and there were personal/professional conflicts, was let's spend every dollar in a way that makes us feel sort of marginally good about ourselves. We're getting too deep philosophically, but the reality is the way you run a business or a government is you have to set aside enough dollars to make sure you can operate the next year, and then we can talk about dividing up the pie. Here we divided up all the pie, and if that division wasn't good enough, we just divided up some more we didn't have. Right? And if we didn't like that, then we borrowed because it allowed us to feel better. In the meantime, we created 6% plus on debt service to operating budget and deficits in our retained earnings. So the approach has changed. With your help, we've developed financial reserve policies that set aside dollars first. And then they're reasonable. We took the unusual step, I think, from my experience in setting floors and ceilings, so we don't get too crazy about things. And we set about on a plan that said we're gonna reduce debt service, we're gonna set aside dollars first, and we're gonna try to grow out of this, but we're gonna grow in a way that makes sense. And so that's a long answer to say that over time, we've built budgets that are more responsible. We give ourselves the flexibility to cover things like extraordinary special ed costs or extraordinary snow and ice costs, which happen way too often. In the end, have built reserves to give us the opportunity that if there's problems or we need to build a kindergarten, we can take those reserves to one specific answer to your question and use $4 million of one-time money to pay for 2/3 of the cost of a kindergarten building to help us bring down classroom size, where we could not have done that anywhere in the first decade of the last century without borrowing further, right? And then try to figure it out later. So the answer is having the proper reserves gives you the flexibility to make decisions when either opportunity arises, kindergarten, or when problems exist. Problem, 2 years ago, blizzards, our snow and ice budget's $1 million, the cost was $3 million. We did not need to disrupt operations, we did not need to cut staff, we did not need to end the world, sound the buzzer. Many of you who were not on the committee, I know the ones who were fine, but those who weren't on the committee, it wasn't like there was just, the world is falling down or collapsing. We were able to deal with that deficit, move on, and continue operating. So sort of that sustainability and stewardship approach that allows us to incrementally improve ourselves with a lot of support, finance committee, school committee, selectmen, and others, have allowed us to get to that point. So the answer is the flexibility to take care of opportunities and risks. That's where it goes.
So what are the safeguards in the 5-year forecast?
Sorry, one of my bosses, hold on. Phil, I'm in the finance committee.
Hi, Phil.
Oh, he's in my office.
Tell him to stop bothering.
How's it going? In my office, I thought I locked it.
As soon as you said finance committee, you hang up.
Do what you want to do. Sorry.
So where are the safeguards in those 5-year forecasts so that we can maintain that safety net, should these things happen again? Plus,
Yeah, that's a fair question.
we're now going into the 10th year of the recovery. You look at history, you have every 10, 15 years, something hits. Nobody thinks anything is out there, but we know how quick that can change. So that's my first question. I have another one, but so that's.
We're buying Bitcoin, aren't we?
I see that on the commercials, doesn't it? I think the safeguards are in a number of things. Something like a financial reserve policy at least makes us pay attention. The fact that as a group, more than one person has bought in, right, to the idea that we do things in that sort of incremental fashion. The conservative nature of forecast to set expectations at realistic levels. We made a conscious effort of really driving down debt service as a percentage of operating revenue, because even though this is a good time to borrow from a cost perspective, the risk is the economy changes for the good. Inflation presses interest rates up. We end up at a 7% interest rate climate, and all of a sudden, that debt service doesn't look as attractive. So it really is multifaceted, and yet I will tell you that even from the financial forecast, I think you see it through my quotes there throughout the document. My greatest concern is that we get too excited. It's great to be excited, and so we should be excited about what we accomplished, but get too excited and too far ahead of ourselves to not remember where we're at, because I completely agree with you. Who knows what what happens tomorrow. The states, by 31 out of 50 states, I think, are operating out of operating deficits. Our state is one of those. If you look at the states that are not operating off deficits, they're a really long way away, and they grow a lot of corn and do things that we don't do. So as successful as the state has been in growing business, we're not seeing huge upticks in terms of state aid and those kinds of other revenue sources. We are property tax reliant. 76% of our revenue comes off of property tax. I don't think that's gonna change much. So we need to be modest growers, right? We need to be cognizant of where we came from and not forget that. And so I think the message is from us that we keep on reminding people of Stan will remind us, right? You were here during those times, that.
He was here back in.
Yeah, it was farming 1,000 years ago with
He's a namesake. So, but in seriously, I think Stan can talk to those things, right? We know how bad it can be.
Yeah.
Right? And so, I think we embrace what we have as a success and keep on reminding ourselves it can be pretty bad. And so we try to be conservative about almost everything we do. I think we have to be cautious, even though we have some goals to make sure we are not aggressive about adding employees whenever possible, because employees have costs beyond the immediate benefit of salary. We've got insurance costs and those kind of things. So yeah, it's something we think about in the building every single day, but it only works if everybody agrees. Because once it starts to splinter apart and one group goes off and tries to get its particular form of funding, I can tell you my experience is it's really difficult to manage.
Can I piggyback on what you asked?
Sure can, Jill.
And maybe I'm interpreting wrong, and I'm not an accountant, but when I look at this page here that talks about the 5-year financial forecast, we're in the red at the bottom number.
Exactly.
So I wouldn't know why anybody would be optimistic. I think we've done very well. I'm not debating
Yeah.
that, but I think we have a ways to go, and we have some major expenses coming, so.
Well, so what I would say to you is, although Tim sort of kicked it off that way, right? What I'd say to you is, the people in this room and some people at home, even though I really like to think when I walk in and present the forecast, I've got 8,000 people at home watching. It's probably
Get a firm
80,
just their spouses.
That's right, 80.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And so, and everybody has individual interests, right? So, when you break down the $100 million budget into individual interests, you start to ask yourself, well, how come I can't do this, and how come I can't do that? And it goes to those, we have expenses to pay, and so then it becomes making those choices on the expenses, and can we afford all of them and all those things. So, the forecast is intended to kick off that environment. It's a reminder, as the
Yes.
quotes are, as other things are,
Yes.
that we constantly need to remain focused on, the goal, and the goal is stewardship and sustainability. But I worry every day, quite frankly.
Well, and I don't see reserve, is there supposed to be reserve lines on this, where we're?
That's an
adding-
operating budget.
That's all.
That's an operating budget.
So, Andrew, I have this question.
Yeah.
Where did you get the quotes? Who did you?
There's a lot of
Did you
quotes.
look up the quotes?
Of course I did.
You looked
There's
up
a
all those
theme every
quotes?
year, yes. there's a theme.
One is his own, he didn't have to look it up.
Yeah,
He had
yeah,
to-
yeah.
he had
Oh,
to
well,
Still
yeah,
remember
you
it.
got one of his in.
Yeah, if you get one good quote out of me, it's good. Yeah, they're all, the web's great.
It's
Yeah,
classic,
so-
it's absolutely classic, every single one of them, you know.
They link to the slide.
So let me help,
Overarching themes.
let me help Jennifer on her thinking process, because I think it's hard to get over the fact that we're forecasting a deficit in the out year. And the logic there is not so much that we're planning on a forecast of deficit. It's more, this is the gap on a conservative revenue stream that needs to be filled. And we need to manage to that so that we don't go red. It is not a planned red environment.
Nope.
So if we look back at the past 5-year plans and you do the math, you're gonna find deficits.
So the question that, I'm gonna piggyback off of what Thomas asked, you talk about safeguards. What could be a classic hiccup that would shock us 2 years from now or 3 years from now? And then I'll have another question on the other side. In other words, that would actually create
Yeah.
that kind of a problem.
Well, I mean, if we ended up in an 08, 09 situation where the state was making cuts to local aid, if that led to people selling their cars and not buying new ones, and so all of a sudden you're trending on motor vehicle excise starts to flatten out, if not decline. Those would be two, you combine that with a, 100-inch snow year, with circumstances where you've added too much staff too fast, even in good initiatives like, school average classroom sizing, and all of a sudden all those things hit, and you've got benefit costs associated with that. So it's typically not one, catastrophic event, and most of the reserves are really safe landing reserves, aren't they? So we're talking about the fact we take care of opportunities, we have an opportunity to use the dollars, talk the opportunity, the use of reserves to diffuse risk. And diffusing the risk gives you the landing to the next day. So, although I wouldn't use overlay to reduce a tax bill, I may recommend that we use a form of reserves to get us through a year while we plan on how we're gonna solve the next year, facing the same pressures that led us here the first time. But it allows that landing to be more gradual.
Take our time, and be
Yeah.
more deliberate about
More
what we're
deliberate
gonna
about it,
do.
more thoughtful, not
Yes.
reactive. I've been in a place where, because the economy was bad and we were not prepared properly, had to cut, close to 10% of staffing across the board. That's not, again, it goes to the same math, except it's different with employees. If you need to cut $50,000 worth of salary, and I said that if you need to do that and find out on January 1, halfway through our fiscal year, you need to cut 100,000. In employees, it's different. You now have unemployment. So you need to cut 3 times the salary to cover the unemployment cost and be left over. So, and in fairness, we're 60-70% employee costs. We don't have big buckets of other expenditures where you make things like $500,000 go away. You have a $500,000 problem or $1 million problem or something of that nature, you're dealing with staffing because there's all the pencils in the world aren't making that difference, right? And so we're prepared for that. We are now prepared to weather a period of time, in my opinion, if it happened. We just don't want to self-inflict that. Right?
No,
If it's
understand.
outward inflicted, then we have that transition period,
Yeah.
maybe even to weather the storm long enough to come out the other side with no change. But at least we'll have time to sit in this room and have a conversation about how those services are impacted. And I can tell you in a way, that conversation we just wouldn't have had the time to do it.
What about, just from a, we just had these fires in these towns in California where basically the whole city got, the property base got completely wiped out.
Right.
Now, I don't even know how all that, adds up. I'm sure suddenly the town doesn't have any income because those houses are gone. And I don't know if you can collect taxes on a burned house. So if that happened here in North Andover, let's say 50% of the tax revenue just disappears overnight. Hurricane, water, snow, whatever it is. These towns didn't even think that would ever be possible, and yet it happened overnight.
Yeah.
So are there any of these, war games, if that is really?
Catastrophic planning,
Yeah.
is that,
I think
So who would step in,
Yeah, I think you're exactly
Federal
right. I think
disaster
if you look at what happened in, I happened to overhear a conversation between 2 folks in my business in Texas. And it was interesting when talking about the fact that they have these existing contracts for these disposal removal companies, I never really thought about, right? We think about if there's a little bit of a flood or a backup, somebody, you know, go hire a company to take stuff out of your basement. They have townwide and citywide contracts like this, where they, with a city in essence, what's
Houston.
the bill, Houston, and even some of the smaller, what they basically do is, they every 3 years go out to bid for these vendors, just in case, what happened with
Insurance
Harvey
policy.
happens, and they in turn tell every resident, take everything out of your house that's damaged, put it on the curb or put it in the middle of the street, and up come these bulldozers and other related equipment. And the city funds that, because the reality is if they're not, you know, no one's gonna be able to reassemble their lives. And so they think about things like that. We certainly have, you know, disaster plans more from a public safety perspective, but there are certain things, even significant blizzards or good power outages, which have been a little more common, where we're gonna rely on our state and federal partners. I think there's certain things we just can't have every precaution against. I do think, again, we're positioned today to deal with most reasonable or reasonable plus problems, but there are certain things that are beyond our ability to manage, and I think,
Were we financially prepared for this last storm that took us down for almost a week? The grid?
sure. I mean, we don't run the
Not a lot of
electricity.
lost revenue,
Well, I don't know what
Yeah, we don't
took
run
to
the
the town
electricity.
versus.
You save money.
sales taxes.
Yeah, there was, you know, it's one of the things that I've sort of been public about, because you know, it's completely sort of off-book conversation, but the reality is, our utility system, and it's not that town of North Andover's utility system, but it's a utility system that all our businesses pay and all our residents pay into, its infrastructure is not where it should be. And so people lose power, they lose power longer. We have to commit resources to that, we managed through that. I think our folks did a phenomenal job of sort of navigating that. But in the end, our businesses lost 4 days of generating revenue, some of which comes back to us, more importantly, comes back to their family to help, you know, balance the books and make those businesses less viable, because they're out of business for 4 days. 4 days can mean a heck of a lot to a business, and so, from that perspective, it had less of a direct impact on us. We're more, being a northeast community, more directly hit by large storms, maybe some ice storms as there was years ago, and snowstorms, where we, again, you know, a couple of years ago when we had the $3 million cost around a couple of blizzards, I think all the storms were like from January 26th onwards,
Yes.
something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
4 blizzards in like 3 weekends
Yeah.
or something. A lot of the communities around us were moving in and taking money out of reserves. We actually have enough, you know, we were operating well enough to say to departments, you need to stop spending so we can take that out of operating revenue. We did that through the end of the year. So we didn't have to impact reserves dramatically, because we used our own, we worked with our own departments to manage expenses through the end of the year. And so the cooperation from the departments, and what happens when it happens at the elected level, quite frankly, it's a lot easier to have communication with those folks making decisions on the ground, who see the collegiality and support from the you know, school committees of the world and everybody else. And they wanna contribute to it, making sure that you know, we get through the year, because they know that sometimes happens.
Is there anything about the changes in the federal tax code on, that can negatively impact the state or the local governments? I'm gonna say, in the law of unintended effects or intended effects, whichever way. So are we all kind of sort of like bracing to see where this?
I mean, especially a high-tax state like Massachusetts, where the deductibility of state income tax may go away.
I mean,
Major problem for Massachusetts.
Yeah.
So Collins put a 10%, or $10,000. She saved it a little bit, but gosh knows what's gonna come out of this committee.
Not as, I would say not as much direct on us, there's a little bit of chatter of what's gonna go on. We are, municipal retirement, in Massachusetts is we're one of the states that does not pay into Social Security. So we have our own retirement system, and we operate our own retirement systems, we're part of a regional system. There's some conversation about whether or not, there's always been chatter of whether or not they would make us taxable again, you know, whether that's through Social Security or a different method. We're not hearing that, but there, you know, so not as much on a direct basis are we hearing anything's gonna impact. A little bit about the question of whether or not our tax exempt bonds, which we issue into the market,
Yes.
whether that tax exempt status will remain. And so if that's not the case, then obviously the tax exempt bond, we used to deal with that, right? So the true interest cost of maybe 3%, might go to 5 or 6%. Again, that's why you make sure that debt service, our debt service in our water and sewer enterprise funds was north of 40% when I arrived, it was 45%. 45 cents of every dollar you committed to water and sewer was going to pay for debt. And we had seen water and sewer increases on, it was a little bit like the Richter scale. We'd go up, we'd go down, we'd go up, we'd be all over the place. We're currently sitting at below, I think, somewhere like 28% in one fund and 18% in the other, and we haven't raised water and sewer rates in 6 years. Again, you just pay attention to the fundamentals. You shouldn't be borrowing money to the extent that you can't afford to repay. When you start to drive debt service down, you're exhausting and paying off debt, you're refinancing debt whenever possible, and not incurring new debt when you don't need to. Your operating cost goes down because you're not paying the debt service. Your operating cost goes down, you don't need to, so some of the stuff was just what I like to talk about as sort of core financial fundamentals and focusing on those fundamentals. I think the forecast's like that, right? So to us, as my family often says, this is not brain surgery. They remind me often what I do is not brain surgery. It's focusing on the fundamentals and getting everybody to focus on those fundamentals so that we have, so we're protected.
So Andrew, we get
Yes.
to May, or June, and it's time to float some bonds.
Yes.
And we have this new tax act that says municipal bonds no
Tax
longer.
rate. Yeah.
Right, what,
300 basis points, 250 basis points.
Sure.
So it means that what you probably will see, and that's part of the reason, again, part of the reason of taking debt service down, so we have a debt service range of 4 to 6%, but we've often traveled around 6%. So you wanna, do I think we could operate at 6%? Yes, but we've been operating at about 5% to give us some room. You never know what the world's gonna change like. So it means that it's going to impact our capital plan moving forward, but not to the degree it would have if we were carrying 6% and new debt
and then
costs
have
more.
that happen.
And so again, it gives us that time to sort of address that. And in the meantime, we've been borrowing, I don't know, borrowing less money than the other ways, but generally speaking, borrowing less money. We've shortened, as you and I have talked about, we've shortened the repayment periods. If it's a 20-year bond, we never repay it in 20 years. It's always shorter, I don't mean longer. If it's 10 years, we borrow less than 10 years. So our average repayment is about 11 years, which is, compared to the industry, very, very positive. We refinance, actually, in a municipal environment, it's called an advanced refunding. We're not allowed to refinance in the traditional way. It has to be built into the sale of the bond. We only can do it every so often. But when possible, take advantage of those advanced refundings to reduce the average cost of interest, and we do that on pretty, now it's my money.
Boss got picked up. You called your mother.
Phil called your mother, you're really in trouble now.
You can't deny it.
It's the problem with the internet. My mother's probably watching at home.
Now you better go.
She's talking about Christmas. I'm not ready for that conversation. See, I would much rather do municipal finance, right? I mean, it's a complicated discussion when you want 3 boys. From that perspective, I think it's right. So we do all those things to try to manage debt service, and I think it's fairly easy within a municipal setting to go off and say, we're gonna do all these projects and go off and borrow money. It almost seems like it's in a distance, right? And I find that to a certain degree, and sometimes in municipalities where have sort of had to come in and sort of look at the plan. What happens is the capital plan becomes aggressive because people are asking for things and they're never asking how much it costs. So if you're the owner of a company and you're borrowing the money, then you're thinking about not only the benefit of what you're purchasing, but you're paying the bill. And to a certain extent, with no disrespect to the departments, we're asking them what they need, but we don't cost center it back to the departments. It all comes out of central debt service. And that's the way municipalities operate. So to a certain extent, my job, the job out of my office, is to sort of have them recognize that, is that we ask for what we need when we need it, and doesn't mean we don't have needs. And we have a capital plan in which every one of the projects approved has to be substantially complete with 18 months from the beginning. And when I arrived, we saw some projects that were 2 and 3 years out. I won't talk about arbitrage, but 2 or 3 years out without having spent dollars. And in those particular cases, we have authorized and issued debt, right? And so we're feeling like the community feels like we're doing X, but we're not actually getting to X. So we should be placing in capital plans, and I think we've done a really successful job. The capital plan will be released on the 18th and get to you guys on the 19th, of making sure that the capital plan reflects what we can spend within an 18-month period. And therefore, the debt service reflects what we can afford to pay.
I want to come back to the topic, because it's a good segue into the question I asked you, the facilities master plan. whether it be modified or phase two, but I wanna come back to that, cause I wanna hit a little bit more, stay with the forecast for a few minutes, more minutes. And this may involve, some of Eric's comments as well, and maybe the two of you can, tango a little bit on this. The funds thing, you got a forecast, but which really is your business plan for economic growth? It's not that the revenues aren't in here, but what's happening down Main Street right now that we can think about, plan, hope for, what's on the horizon, what do you see? Okay, fine, Amazon H2 is gonna be here, right? But, I mean, but I'm interested in,
What's the $1 billion we have to give them?
No tax breaks.
I'll give $1 billion and a bit.
so
Billion's fine.
between you and Eric, what do you see that's on the upside that's not in your forecast?
Yeah, I mean, Eric can kick that off, I can sort of fill in the gaps.
In terms of what's coming down,
It's generally what you feel, what you see out there.
well, let me start where I guess what I'm feeling most positive about, and that is the mills. I think the mills are a great example of we had a situation where you had two major corporations walk out. To tell you the truth, I don't know the number of jobs that were associated with those two, but over 300,000 square feet kind of emptied out. And the owners, the principals of that development, working with the town, having been involved with the east side of the mill, we were able to turn that around and bring in, I think there are over 90 companies between those two mills. It's a model of mixed use development, restaurants, fitness centers, offices, manufacturing, modern manufacturing. You have companies 10 companies say that with over 50 employees, 60 employees, 80 employees, that adds up. I think it's probably about 1,500 jobs in there. They're at a point where they're essentially 100% on the east side. I'd say at least over 75, 80 on the west side. Could be wrong on that. They've developed, they have 61 market rate apartments, loft style apartments, and they're coming in, they're not stopping. They're coming in with a proposal for 51 more units. It's actually construction, so it's not just repurposing of the mills, but new construction. So I'm high on that. I think building upon that, as well as Brad Street on Main is starting to fill up. If people have driven down Main, you can see some signs now on the front, on the first and second floor. I think there was caution about that they have difficulty on the second floor, and I think the second floor filled up before the first one. I shouldn't say filled up, but some good tenants on the second floor. But that's starting to fill up. We're seeing, I think, some interest, people saying, we're noticing what's happening with the downtown. So I think that's something I would focus on as a major positive. The master plan itself, the process we're going through, is taking a hard look at both the 114, in particular, I'd say the 114 corridor, and 125 corridor. I think we'll be able to clear up and be more cohesive in our zoning, which should, I think, hopefully lead to some more development on 114. 114's tough. It's not as much land off 114 as you might think. It's a pretty narrow stretch of a corridor. 125, similar, but a little better. So, there's a lot of positives going on. There aren't big home runs necessarily, but there's some very good, positive, decent stuff.
So the
Barker's on a big home run?
well, Parker's
Barker? It's not
Barker.
Barker.
Parker.
There's
Oh,
Barker.
Fajetta? I'm sorry,
Is
so,
that-
yeah,
Sorry.
Maybe that's been in the works so long that it isn't.
It's a farm.
That's a past.
it was, the Fajetta, no, that's a home run. I guess,
That's
it's gonna
past
happen.
news,
It'll
right?
start, it'll
Okay.
start in the spring. I'm focusing more
Yeah,
on
no,
the
that's what
rec,
I'm asking, okay.
But,
Yeah, that's 192 units of market rate housing and 43,000 square feet of commercial. The former Solo Cup site off of Holden
Right.
Road, which was vacant for 6 years, 250,000 square feet, is currently under lease. We've been dealing with the permitting for a company called Light Foam. They're a division of Coleman. They make coolers, but they do so at a level that is, pretty intense and not a fly-by-night company. It's a big national company looking for a new national headquarters. They're originally located in Peabody, so the Light Foam division of Coleman is, I don't know when they're gonna occupy, but I think they've started some of that already, right?
Yeah, I would certainly think they'd be in there by spring. We're talking about 100 jobs.
250,000 square feet.
250,000 square feet, and they're,
Right.
is it, the foam cooler?
Make foam coolers permanent, but
That-
then we make some other medical cooler related
Medical
items.
for
that
Have we
transport.
replaced Converse revenue?
It's
Yeah.
on revenue, because
I know
again,
what you call
the assessed, yeah, and I just want to be clear. So
Yeah,
the assessed
yes.
value, so that's the mill properties.
Yeah.
I would say we have at least as many jobs. We have more businesses, rather than two big businesses.
Right, I know.
That was Converse's
So if we lose
national
one, it's
headquarters.
not.
Yeah, so in some ways, the good news is we got this sort of
Yes.
interesting mix of high-tech companies, as Eric identified, and some other companies. I think even though they took down 1/3 of the buildings, because they recognized that surface parking
Mhm.
added value on a cost per square foot basis, people don't wanna park in the far parking lot to walk back. That was a major play, because it allowed them to fill in those other spaces with a pretty interesting mix of high-tech companies, some restaurant retail, there's a restaurant that's been permitted, another.
I think we'll see,
Another similar place.
a large restaurant, Jade,
Yeah.
opening probably sooner than this spring.
175 seats.
So as a
Yeah.
community, what do we do to attract businesses? What has, in your experience, been the most successful way that we can attract businesses to our community? And then what kind of businesses do you think are most helpful to our community to drive economic growth and just really increase vitality in the community?
Okay, so I'll say this, in this day and age, a community that is a great place to live. I think for companies that show stability, so the financial stability, a AAA rated, community certainly helps. They know there's stability there, and cohesiveness in the local government. Obviously, that's the trick, right? Economic development isn't just about, find a company, put jobs in, it really hinges off of everything. So community and economic development is all about the community. And so schools, police, fire, everything. And that perception, that's our greatest asset as well as location. So companies that wanna be in that environment, they wanna come here. I'm never going to get someone that wants to be in downtown Boston, try and compete with it. We're happy, I think we're well positioned in those companies that wanna be in close proximity to a Boston. But their workers wanna be in a place where they can raise a family, grow, stay, get invested for quite a long haul, including, retirement. So it's funny, I think that's our best attribute. We need to do, our job is to, I think, market that, and do a better job of marketing that. And I also think marketing it within the region, we've talked about that. It's not just about North Andover, right? And our communities our surrounding communities embracing that as well.
And so how do we do that? So what's the most effective way to do that? Is there, I'm sure there are, I just don't know, conferences that you go to, are there avenues in which you have found to be most successful, or Andrew has found to be most successful? I mean, how does that work?
Well, I
And
think
or
if
is
we
it
could just jump in.
zoning
So-
and changing the
well,
layout?
So one of the pieces that Eric you just touched on, but I would, is the fact that what you wanna make sure is when they come here, they feel like doing business here is a good place to do business. So you get sort of two stages, right? There's the engagement in the wedding, right? Maybe the beginning of the wedding, some metaphor like that. So, but the idea is you wanna get them here, and Eric's talked a little bit about that, and then you wanna make sure they stay. And I think something we do called the TRC, Technical Review Committee, that allows businesses to come in and sit around the room with all of those people, which will impact their ability to deliver a business here. Police, fire, the clerk's office, building, all that kind of stuff. They sit around a room, and not a lot of communities have this. and we meet with them in advance of pulling building permits, or depending on the stage of development, and we talk to them about how to make it easier for them to get to the finish line, because every transition is dollars, right? Every cost of the business, how much is it gonna cost to relocate here? What's the building climate like? And so that TRC is a real asset of ours, where we put those people at a table, we convene it within 2 or 3 days of anybody asking. Quite frankly, they're always held on Wednesdays, but 2 or 3 days, someone comes in and says, recently had a business they can't talk about, but it's more restaurant-like, and they have an interest, and it's fairly large scale, we wanna talk about this, how does it work here? Right, they may be from somewhere else, right, how does it work here? We put the people on the table, we tell them what to think about, so
But
it's
how are
this.
they even finding us?
So that's first, that's sort of,
Yeah.
right. Defining us is that we are regularly networked with both state and federal officials and other groups which give us those kinds of contacts. So the state has a business development office that stays in regular contact with the community on any number of initiatives. So if you're a fairly large business and you're looking to locate somewhere, you're often communicating with the state, because the state can give you a number of different pieces of advice. One is what's available in the marketplace, so they're aware of all the opportunities in the marketplace. Places like the Solo Cup site, they're aware of, Osgood Landing, they're aware of, they have that sort of
Master
regional
list.
inventory, right? And two, what's available through the state for other incentives. So we had a company that's currently at Osgood Landing that was going from 200 to 400 employees, sort of a back office shop type place. So the state's still involved with them, gave us a grant to help them, or gave them a grant to help. So more often than not, the state is a fairly significant partner, as is Mass Development. That's a quasi-governmental agency that provides funding for certain groups who are looking. Sometimes it can be nonprofits or for-profits too, right? Mass Development is engaged. Mass Development is involved in the Brad Street project as an example. So private equity through the bank, Mass Development helping bridge some gaps. A lot of the work on Merrimack College is funded through Mass Development. So I would say those state partners are big in connecting and making us aware of what's out there in the marketplace. In addition to a level of branding that isn't, quite frankly, as successful, because the first decision that businesses make is access.
I was gonna say,
And so from an
highways
access
and stuff.
perspective, we're not gonna be Pfizer's home, right? So I don't have any problem with that, it's just sort of a fair comment, right? There was a business years ago, had some interest, was looking for headquarters. We showed them we thought, appropriate site. And the response was that we've decided we're only gonna be on 93 and 128. So our cost per square foot was lower, we're a good place to be, but that's not where they wanted to be. So we come into the game understanding our shortcomings and our strengths, and we emphasize the strengths like any other business strategy, and we try to minimize our shortcomings and make it as efficient as possible to work here. So I would say Mass Development and our state's Economic Development Division are our most common partners as it relates to opportunities. We do also have, working with Merrimack Valley Planning Commission. Merrimack Means Business, which is a central website of available properties and access to the region. And we have initiated, we've actually sort of been at the heart of a branding initiative in what we're now calling Lower Merrimack Valley, I guess. Branding initiative for the entire region. It's sort of a story, it's an internal story. Yeah, no one can tell you where the Merrimack Valley begins and ends, that's the problem, right? So some people go, right, because the Merrimack goes up to Concord, so we.
I think we just
We branded
made it
our own,
lower, yeah.
we
just
sub-branded
decided to do
ourselves.
it.
We're in a room, we finally said,
Just move on.
we
Yeah.
picked it. Yeah.
So we applied for the grant with the Commonwealth, got a grant, and have been working with a branding company who's developing logos and taglines for the region. Because we do think a regional play is important. We've advertised at Logan Airport about sort of North Andover's benefits, little things like that. So we do a level of marketing. Quite frankly, that most marketing like that really is coming through the state. If you're a big business, you're communicating with the state and say, why should I come to Massachusetts? They're getting a hold of those folks from the state. Those state, by the way, there is a regional representative so we have a regional representative. They're communicating what's available, what they're hearing. Hey, by the way, I got a customer, a client, they're looking for, 100,000 square feet. Here's what they need access to these roadways. What do you have out there as inventory? And so Eric communicates with them on a regular basis. And then, quite frankly, it's very important that we maintain relationships with the existing business, no matter how small or how large, because we want them to stay. And I think the mills are a good example. The mills, the folks who had developed, I always get it wrong, East Mill.
Eastman.
are a major player in the region. They have big developments in Salem, big developments in Somerville, been around for a long time. They recognize the ability of the town to wanna work with them. And so when the property across the street came vacant and it was up on the market, they wanted to buy it, because they recognized the opportunity. And they purchased the mill, they worked with us on a zoning change, and it has empowered them to do what they're doing today, which is add more jobs than what were here when Conference was here. And we believe that Main Street will ultimately be an extension of the mills, that the mills need to stretch out, bring in more people, walk to downtown and make those connected dots. Because in and of itself, just because a lot of people drive up and down Main Street isn't changing sort of how people view it economically. You know, cost per square foot on office rent, by the way, in North Andover is not as high as it is in other places. Because again, it's not on 93 and 128. So it's all those things. It's partnering with Merrimack College, who has invested, God, hundreds of millions of dollars in the campus in the last couple of years, bringing 1,000 more students, going to the businesses, right? Partnering with them because we want those students to stay here, not go to the bars, but stay here and go to other restaurants and provide economy. So it's always multifaceted. I will say to you, and not as a bad way, we are 87% residential and 13% commercial via tax base. I wouldn't expect that's going to change much, right? I just wouldn't. That's not a criticism, or it's it would change if Amazon.
It just puts more of the tax burden on the town for improvements. I think we have to be honest about that, you know what I mean, like.
Can I ask why, or so how do it, so
Yeah,
is
I
it
don't
that,
understand.
is it a function of location where we're not on 93, so we're less attractive no matter how wonderful of a community we are? Is it a function of,
Choice.
that a somewhat
Citizen
choice?
choice.
Quite frankly, I think that was a choice many years ago in terms of how zoning was
Well, it's important to know that-
created on 114.
Well,
We have very limited amount of land zoned for commercial development.
that's right, so this
That percentage is low,
master-
so that is
Right.
a choice, right?
Right, that,
That's
so.
part.
We could change that.
So that's,
The
I think
master
that
plan
some of
for it.
we would love a
Yeah.
little more color on that comment, so like what is
So,
it?
yeah, so here's some examples. So I would say to you that it is a community that saw itself, I can only reflect, right? I can only,
Mhm.
based upon what I see sort of in the rearview mirror, it was a community that largely evolved around, it's gonna sound disparaging, not intended to be. This town largely developed around Lucent. It had 12,000 jobs, the community was growing, a lot of farmland, people moved into the community, said it was a great place to live, wanted the open space, and you had 12,000 jobs here, running 3 shifts. And over time, as that became, the community developed in that way. People here have a great pride in protecting open space and living in nice residential neighborhoods, or those kinds of things. And therefore, and converting farms to either protected open space, which has been a conscious decision, or protecting residential developments. So I don't know how much of that is going to change, and I don't look at that as a but. I really don't, in the sense that this community likes its residential heritage, right, likes what it is. I mean, I'm not sure what the deficit of that is, in the sense that if you could take underutilized parcels like Solar Cup, and in fairness, like 1600 Osgood, and you can make them more vibrant, bringing in more taxes. I mean, Osgood Landing brings $372,000 in taxes, it's 169 acres of property. So from that perspective, those are kinds of decisions. From my perspective, it's not necessarily the saturation, it's the occupancy of the
Yes.
existing spaces.
Yes.
What does the balance of the 125 corridor look like? We had proposed something several years ago. We had a study done by sort of the dean of planning in Massachusetts, a UMass professor, John Mullen, who came in and had done a study on 125. We talked a lot about, he came up with some sort of ideas around how to revitalize 125. Some of that centered around placing sewers in 125. That was defeated as a proposal on town meeting to add sewers, because we felt that businesses are more attracted to knowing they have a utility than actually bringing septic systems onto large-scale property. But that did not pass from a design perspective of town meeting. So we think that it is using the the commercial corridors we have today and getting more value out of them. I wouldn't expect that we're gonna use existing open spaces in residential neighborhoods and turn them into commercial neighborhoods. That's why I say that 8713 may change in terms of better utilization of those spaces, and I think that's fair. But when you have 192 units of residential housing at Fajetta Farm, that was open space, now becoming residential, it's 43,000 commercial, 192 residential. Berry Farms is 196, likely 125 units on the KFC site, something like that. It is a place where people want to build some form of home and live. That is the place, that is North Andover's image, and quite frankly, it's a pretty good image. People wanna live here, they're not moving out, property values are going up. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't be utilizing more effectively and getting more out of, and I think that's where the master planning process can come in hand. Let me give you an example. If you go down from Route 114 in whatever direction you want to travel, but let's go from the college heading down to the Middleton line, and you look right and left, with no disrespect to anybody's business or home there, I don't know what's going on.
And that was a function of historic zoning, right?
Well, that's
So-
what I'm asking.
So
of the
as
master.
those,
Yeah.
I would say, I'm
Because you
not
go to
disagreeing.
Middleton
And
and all of
maybe
a
it's
sudden you
not,
see it's
but-
development,
Yeah.
development, development.
It is-
commercial.
It's like at the town line it starts.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, well, although we have a really nice commercial development in the corner of Sharpness Pond Road, I think a really good
Not
use of
for
the
you.
asset, generally speaking.
It's welcoming
but-
you right into Middleton.
Yeah, but it's, well, I think it's actually toward us.
It's welcoming you into it.
I would say yes and
Turn
no.
it
So-
around.
I'm not criticizing Middleton, which, Middleton's fine, but really the first stop in Middleton is Dunkin' Donuts. So-
Yeah.
Because I stopped, so I can tell you that. But as you come up in that direction, generally speaking, there really is, it's a function, I would say certainly zoning, right? You bump into houses and you get National Grid.
Yeah.
Some of that, isn't, I'm not sure it's not going to change, but it certainly is not an overnight change, right? Because if you have houses until someone abandons it and turns into commercial, it's always about the value proposition. As you know, people wanna buy, it's the value of being able to take that land and do something with it. We also, we miss some of the real successes because we don't talk about the real successes. Watts Water is an 1800s-ish international firm, headquartered in North Andover, beautifully located on a hill. It is the preeminent company in its field in the world, right? And it looks nice, there's nothing wrong with it. Then we decided from a zoning perspective, we're gonna deal primarily with sort of commercial office space in the corridor, and then we got into some sort of dog grooming and related stuff. I would say one of the in addition to the zoning, one of the limitations beyond Jasmine Plaza is the fact that travel down there and look how deep the lots are. The zoning exists today, because it was changed over multiple different phases by town meeting. Look at how deep the lots are right and left. You can see the abutting house already constructed behind it. And so if you're a commercial developer, and I can look from here to away from the backyard, what am I gonna build if I'm only 100 feet from the back lot line?
It's not
So
as-
some of it's zoning and some is what I would refer to as planning. Why did we allow the residential subdivision to be so close to the commercial corridor? Because if I'm trying to build any kind of business, I can't have it be 100 feet deep, right? I can't provide the parking. So certainly Eric has been a champion of this. I think we're gonna need to change some of the zoning requirements, which will require more density than people like, because without the density, without the ability to sort of erase those lot lines, we're looking at that underutilized stretch, especially from, say, Jasmine Plaza up to the bypass on both sides. I think there'll be more growth beyond that. I think there continues to be vibrancy. North Shore Mall's active. We see some fast food, but they're occupied. Merrimack's pretty vibrant, but I think that's the weakest stretch of 114, from the bypass back to about Jasmine Plaza or the car wash on the other side. Right, that's,
What is that 87-13 mix in Andover?
what is that?
The 87-13
Yeah,
mix?
my guess is I don't know. I should have been reading those tax articles. I'm sure it's all of 80-20.
Mm.
I mean, you have major headquarters of major corporations in there.
I was thinking the same thing, but what about other towns that we would be compared to,
Yeah,
like Reading,
who's our
North
peer,
Reading?
who's our peer?
Towns
Yeah,
that are reasonably.
I would say North Reading would be the same, if not a smaller number. They don't have a tremendous, they have some along 28 as an example. North Reading, I don't know the exact breakdowns, but they're not dissimilar. But again, if you look across the main commercial corridor, which in Reading and North Reading is 28, you're talking, you've got the depth of parcels there that are just really deep parcels. So you're putting in a commercial space because you have the depth to add that kind of parking if it's retail and other use.
Right.
And you look across 114, you just don't have the depth. I would say behind 114 on Flagship is remarkably vibrant. Drive behind there, look at the businesses, they
Is that
employ a
behind
lot
Stop
of
and
people.
Shop?
Yep.
Behind Stop and Shop, that whole
We're
area
filling that
behind.
back in with some, because I know
Yep.
there's some vacancies.
3M's over there.
Yeah.
Bacon Joy is.
Bacon Joy is
Yeah,
massive.
no, that's huge.
Yep, so there's more there than appears because it's set off the street and it's all this sort of office space.
So residential?
But there's a tremendous amount of commercial in that area as
The
well.
look.
So we need to better utilize the parcels we have, there's no doubt about it.
What are the economics of, for instance, the farm up the street, the mixed development project? You get revenue from a lot of apartment rentals, but, a lot of those will come with kids, to 18,000, 19,000 per kid. Is that net positive, or is that
liability waiting to happen?
I think I haven't looked at all the taxes, I think that'll be net positive, it's market rate, the mix of the units will be a little less than you'd think in terms of the raw impact on the school department. School can pay about 12 to 13,000 per student, so I think the mix on that is okay, that is a net gain. But we certainly have some residential developments that are not net gain, and we certainly have some that are not net gain.
Right.
The overall service to commitment, we've been pretty public that we're unhappy generally, not with the fact that there is residential property at Royal Crest, that we just don't think the owners of the property have kept up their end of the bargain, quite frankly. We don't think it represents what we would want in North Andover for anybody to live in. So I think I've been vocal enough about that to say it again. So I think on a market rate development like that, it doesn't mean that affordable isn't, but I would certainly say on that development, the impact should be relatively minor. And it's a $30 to $40 million bill, not counting the commercial. That's
Right.
gonna generate a fair amount of tax.
Something else I never understood, if you have a mill and a client leaves, doesn't the mill still pay tax on the square footage? Obviously you want the business for other compounding reasons, but what happens in terms of their tax
That's
burden?
really great. I think so the approach on assessing as it relates to most of the commercial development is typically, or one method, and the assessors have some flexibility on this, is an income or income expense approach to the mill. So what is the income being generated by the mill by having those rent revenues? One tenant doesn't have an influence. In the case of the mill, of the West Mill, we in essence lost 387,000 square feet worth of tenant when Converse and Snyder left. In that case, the value of the property becomes a little bit of a challenge if it remains vacant for a long time, because you don't have a revenue supporting. So I would say to you, a vacancy, even of a reasonable space, is not in and of itself causing the problem. Long-term vacancy can. The fact that you may have, a per square foot cost of $10 or $12 versus a neighboring community which, say, is along 93 and is getting $25, that drives value. So the same building, if it costs, $50 million to build it here, or $25 million to build it here, and $25 million to build it in another community, if they're getting a higher cost per square foot, they're getting more taxes off that property, because the value through an income approach is higher.
Got it.
Right? And so, we're not as worried about sort of the transience of having people come in and out of a commercial development, unless you just have a whole sort of departure on that. So, I'm not trying to close that door. I think growth is reasonable, but I think for us, it's utilizing, we've got 10125 here that's been sale for a little bit of time on the corner, pretty sort of dead-end spot. We do think this corridor, we think the airport's a real asset. A lot of corporate jets come in and out of here. We think we can be the kind of place. We did get more of those, quite frankly, with Converse, because Converse is owned by Nike, and so you got a fair amount of sort of east to west coast transports. We think that's opportunity. So there continues to be opportunity, and Eric has touched about that. But it's utilizing the assets we have first as best we can, and then whatever we can infill, I think are positive infill opportunities as well.
So what can you tell us about the big elephant across the street? We haven't really touched that one at all.
Yeah.
And, how are things going? And
My mother's calling.
It's dinner time, have to go.
Yeah. Hey, I'm the youngest.
Probably the favorite.
Yeah.
So,
Depends on the day.
you've been working with the team, doing odds and ends in the background, which you should because it's your job. But what can you at least help us sort of look at relative to the next handful of months or long-term?
Yeah, that's a complicated question, isn't it? So we obviously know that the Osgood Landing folks, one, they did support the Amazon proposal, and I think it makes all good sense that they would, right? I think that's true. I think as they should, they're exploring on a regular basis every opportunity that comes before them, and some of which we, quite frankly, share with them, so that they're aware of them, some they become aware of themselves, and then we've got the marijuana proposal, and it's just sort of it's a wild card, quite frankly. We've got an industry in transition, right? Is there first mover benefit, is there not? The uncertainty in any industry creates the sort of level of dialogue that currently exists, because it's uncertain. What is it? What's the product gonna be? Is it a big win? So we read one article one day that talks about, communities in Colorado who missed the first vote and all voted no and now wanna vote yes. And we read other articles that talk about, other things which would be mitigating factors as not to do it. I think that, understanding more of the picture wouldn't be a bad thing. Understanding the regulations for the state doesn't necessarily hurt. This was a bill, the legislation was written by the industry. So we're waiting a little bit on the state to understand fully what it really means to communities. What are they, that's disappointing, right? Regardless of where you stand on marijuana, in the end of the day, we always want legislation that gives choices to people who live in communities. This legislation didn't do that because it was sponsored by advocates for one industry. That's their right? They did it, they were successful, they ran a campaign, they won. I mean, at the end of the day, a bill that gave more options to communities. I am a huge home rule fan. I don't think we get enough independence from the state. I think we are pretty good at what we do, and don't always like to be told by folks who don't know what we do, why we should do it that way. But that's not really how it works, right? And so we're slaves to the state a little bit on that. It would be certainly better for all of us to understand more of what the picture's gonna look like, and I think the regulations that should in draft form be issued hopefully by Christmas by the Cannabis Control Commission will give us a clearer picture about opportunities and risks that exist in that kind of proposal. In the end of the day, this community benefits hugely with the occupancy of that facility, bottom line. Marijuana is one conversation, as is Amazon, and maybe both are on this, the sort of like the polar opposites. Maybe there's a synergy of uses, I'm not really sure. Cannabis delivery by drones.
Yeah.
I don't know, so, but,
Self-consumption.
it's 169 acres of underutilized space.
Yeah.
We generate more property tax off, we generate, I believe, 4 times as many property tax dollars off Royal Crest at 80 acres than we do off a commercial development that once housed 12,000 people. I mean, in and of itself, we have some, not me, very successful people who probably pay $30,000 in property tax on a home. And we're getting $300,000 in property tax of 169 acres of property that once employed 12,000 people. So when we talk about opportunities, if you give me the one wand, right, the genie wish. It's just fill the damn space, do it right, do it in a way that the community can embrace as the right thing to do, and make it a vibrant business. And I think in and of itself, that changes, I don't know what the needle changes in terms of percentage, but I'd say 10%, 1%, it could be 2 to 3%, right? One building, right, could have a 2 to 3% impact on that move from 87, 84. That's a lot. That's a big impact.
Do you guys have any thoughts for why that didn't fill in with just small businesses?
Like Mills did?
They went to
Yeah.
China, like everything else.
No, but why did Mills fill in?
Other stuff.
Yeah. Mills are very sought after space, by the way. This is a trendy
very hip,
mill.
trendy.
It's a very hip,
Yeah.
trendy thing, right?
It's not so hip and trendy.
It's not so
to be
hip and trendy.
manufacturing.
It's not just industrial, it's
There's
got a
no
lot of
brick.
other things.
I think Eric and I would agree. I'll take this from Eric, but I'll agree with her. Eric and I would agree that the play there 10 years ago was to knock down the manufacturing.
Yes.
No disrespect to your space, which is wonderful, and you can play some video games and some other related. But it would seem to me that when you're operating with largely manufacturing
Make
space.
sure you say something.
Yeah, it looks good.
Because
I endorsed it.
we pay a little bit of that freedom.
I would say
Hard
that it
work every day.
seems, seems logical to me that if you travel the site, that there are aspects of that site which are clearly no longer needed. That it was a pretty interesting place. There are wells, there was a treatment facility, has remarkable sort of power infrastructure, that's the way complimentary, right? There's buildings over here, sort of a separate power plant that hasn't been operated in years. It would seem to me that, and I think Eric would agree with that I think that the first step probably should have been a significant dismantling of most of the infrastructure and create a blank canvas, right? Create the opportunity or a vision so that when someone sees it, they're not imagining.
They see what they want it to be,
what they want it to
not
be.
what it is.
I think the value is in the land, the location.
Sure.
No doubt.
Access, all those kind of things.
It was
that
farmland.
exist. Yeah, it's that interesting, yeah, it was just sort of interesting. So I think that that's part of it, why it didn't happen. Well, first of all, in fairness to them, they purchased a building and they start to do marketing in the middle of, the economy, it's like doing this great tank. And so, some people came out of that better than others. I will tell you this, and I certainly wasn't involved, so it's certainly no credit to our folks, Eric or I or others. The town created zoning there. So to the question sometimes it's about zoning and planning. I have not seen a more liberal, open-ended, appealing, whatever other adjective you wanna add zoning than that overlay bylaw. It allows anything. And it allows odd combinations of anything. Church and school, high-tech company and bingo parlor, probably exaggerating.
Wasn't there an amendment to that like, a couple of years ago at town meeting? Did I make that up?
No, the amendment to the overlay was the downtown overlay had it.
Only the downtown.
No, something directly related to that property, no?
No. No, I don't
I
think
think it
it
was something else
changed.
then.
So that was done in '06, I think it took effect in '07, right?
Passed
So-
in '07.
'07. So it has tremendous flexibility. The bylaw allows, in fact, it's been interpreted that either the underlying or the overlay can be used, which makes it even more flexible. It can be industrial, it can be, and so, yeah, I think the blank canvas is right. I think Eric's right. I think,
I mean, you read the overlay, it
Yes.
begs for, you
Blank with
build new
overlay.
streets, bring them right out, almost like a nice little downtown, you could do that. That takes an incredible amount of investment, but, certainly, there's a lot.
it was a reconstruction. So if the Wang Towers were good because you could buy the buildings and occupy them, this wasn't that, right? You didn't buy the building to occupy it, you needed to buy the building and take it down. It's a remarkable building when you're inside, it's a really neat, very unique building, but in large part, probably for this market, it needed to be at least substantially demolished, I would think.
Okay.
I have back to budget question, if we're done, that's good. Just a budget philosophy question. The top line, as you pointed out, seems conservative. You got 600,000 of new growth next year, and you have 600,000 new growth in year 2023. And so the revenues grow 2 million-ish, 3 million per year. But the expenses go 3 or 4 million per year. And if this went on forever, it would be unacceptable. And so there's I know this is not supposed to reflect reality, it's supposed to reflect a triangulation on likely outcomes. And being conservative on revenue allows you to be more conservative on expenses. But if, for example, we were to grow revenue 4 million instead of the 2 million, would the expenses stay the same? Are they embargoed until you cover this target nut? Or if we did 75 million in revenue next year instead of 100 instead of 95, would the expenses also go up by 5? What's the philosophy on that? And I know it's depends how you get there.
So I would say that the expenses are, as currently presented in a 5-year forecast, are intended to be conservative, which obviously on expenses is the opposite of conservative on revenues, meaning higher than anticipated on average.
Okay.
And so the idea is to have the revenues and expenses not working against one another, but working with one another. My hope would be, so let's say, for a hypothetical question, that a business arrived in town, whatever it is, right? Whatever we wanna call it, wherever it is, and added $3 million to the revenue stream. Right, this is sort of like, we go by what do you do? I am not a supporter of operationalizing revenue in the first year it's received, or probably in the first 5 years it's received.
Okay.
I think every dollar should be spent in the same way that brought us here in that conversation that talked about relationships. We have to decide which ones of those dollars we're not gonna spend first, decide which ones we're comfortable are gonna exist in perpetuity, look at the risks that other revenue sources go away, and decide from that what we're willing to put into the baseline bottom end of the budget. That's the thinking. So, no particular dollar should ever be in an operational budget that we don't believe is gonna last forever, whatever forever means, right?
So an initial boost, in theory, would be added to the reserve in the immediate 1 or 2 years.
Or at least capital
Yeah,
expenditures,
debt.
so one time, right, some methodology, it can be driving down, doing more operational, so your capital plan may end up with more, non-borrowed dollars using the capital fund, might be reserves, it may be using dollars toward capital rather than operational, to keep the debt service in check. God forbid we lose 200 to 300 basis points in debt service, but we wanna own the capital plan we have, it's a pretty good capital plan, it's thoughtful, we're doing work across the board, right? We wanna keep that rather than having that impacted. I would say you're more likely to do things like that. I think that, I don't have a percentage for you, but I wouldn't imagine, in my mind, right off the top of my head, that would ever take more than 1/3 of a new revenue source and put it to an operational budget. Because there, as you know, there's the tentacles of all the other costs that go with it, right? No cost is absolute. Very few costs in an operational budget are absolute. They have triggering effects somewhere else. If If it's people, we know there's benefit costs. If it's people, I also have space costs, right? Where do I put the new space? Where are they, right? Every building we've done, which is, I think we've done a really effective job, we've made actually slightly larger than the last one. So we've had to be conscious to drive energy costs down through some other kinds of efficiencies. Otherwise, we added the spaces, we added maintenance and energy costs. So for me, some number, you know, is that really sort of random at 33 cents on every dollar? You know, maybe I put that to operational, maybe it's 25 cents, I'm not sure what the number is. But on the top side of that, the vast majority wouldn't go to operational until we were guaranteed in some way, and, you know, forever, that we were willing. And if it took us forever to get from that 25%, and maybe that is 25%, and over time it's 50%, but maybe that's 10 years. So we feel comfortable about where we're going. Really great example of that is the health insurance. So we save from one year to the next on health insurance. A really courageous decision by those folks involved, nearly $4 million 1 year over the next. So we took the most debilitating expense and we dropped it by close to $4 million. And with the help of this group and the Board of Selectmen, we didn't spend the $4 million. We spent probably 20% of it, and then 22%, and then maybe 23%. And so we didn't bring the baseline budget to consume the expense savings we had. We realized that we're better off making sure that can happen over time. What if that $4 million went away? It was a little under $4 million.
Well, let's ask the flip question then. If the revenues really did come in here, would these expenses be lower to try to meet some kind of balanced budget?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we're required to have a balanced budget, and to have the baseline beyond that to really hold true to what most bond rating agencies say is we also want a structurally balanced budget. Structurally balanced budget, for those who don't know, means we can't use one-time revenue to balance the budget. So if the revenue is $95 million, then there needs to be $95 million worth of expenses, none of which need to come from one-time revenue. They all need to come from operating revenue. So we would drop expenses, or not drop expenses, we'd do any number of things, quite frankly, to close that gap.
Could you talk about the facilities master plan?
Sure.
I've seen the word modified, I've seen facilities master plan 2. Obviously, we are talking projected kind of numbers, so it's in line with the conversation we're having in your forecast. I know in a couple of weeks you'll be producing the CIP plan, it's a 5-year plan, but we're really focusing on 19. But it's raised questions only because we see the kindergarten school plopped in there, and we know in my discussions with you, there was also a $10 million bogey put on renovating the classrooms in that same study. So can you help address where that $10 million is and how we look at it and what we can expect? Not just that, but.
No.
Yeah.
We'll
call him Mom.
The facility, so again, just sort of repeating some obviously, so it's a facility master plan adopted by town meeting in 2012. It's a 7-project, $30 million-ish series of renovations, expansions, or new builds of 7 public buildings, identified by a study with a group of residents leading that study. First discussed in 2010, and then ultimately approved in 2012. That's every year. First year funds the design, the next year funds the construction, and the next year funds the design and the construction. So town meeting is an opportunity to see sort of the design phase and the construction phase from a transparency perspective. With one red herring being that the Kittredge gym was never part of the plan. Some moment of staring at the inadequate space in the Kfoury school, at the last minute I added the gym because it just was crazy, we didn't have one, right? So other than that, it was all very thoughtful, and that one was a more sort of passionate sort of vision. And it's gone well, so we've marched along the road. The kindergarten was a change to that plan, because the kindergarten was actually put in as a placeholder of $1.5 million to expand classroom or replace the portable buildings that were at several of the elementary schools. The decision was made as we got closer to 1.5 million that we recognized the number was not enough. It was really a placeholder put in some conversations with school folks, way back on, right, Stan? As a function of that, we knew as we got closer we needed. So we used the design dollars to fund a study to look at improvements to the schools, get the best bang of the buck. And what came out of that was the kindergarten building, which allowed us to build 16 kindergarten classrooms, move the students that were in the current 15 of those occupied in the various elementaries, move them into the standalone kindergarten building, creating immediate space in each of the elementary buildings, and creating equity at the kindergarten level by making sure each and every classroom has the same number of students, the same square footage, and the same technology. Today, that's not the case. Some of the square footage is 700, some it's 800, some it's 1,000. The number of students vary from classroom to classroom. So we created this equity and immediately created space. That option was most viable because the other options were to add various classrooms to various buildings, sort of as appendages, quite frankly. It didn't create any sort of consistency, uniformity, or standardization. So that's why the kit treats were selected. It was priced out a little over $6 million. I fully expect we'll be executing the contracts on that facility within the next couple of weeks. Although I don't know if I'm supposed to be telling you that, announcing that, but that's my sentiment. We will be moving forward with the project. So that's that. With that came some other recommendations for some other improvements. And so the facility master plan is moving. It's now in, the DPW facility will open next month. The kindergarten will open in May. Those are projects 5 and 6. And project 7 is the senior center, which we will discuss in more detail several weeks from now. We think that's evolving to a little bit, but in a good way. Anyway, when that's done, facility master plan will be done. And it was designed from a financing perspective to look at the existing debt schedules and order the projects in a way to make sure it had as least amount of impact on debt service by looking at the roll-off of that and matching that with the project which could replicate that debt, so that we would smooth debt service out in a way that we didn't have, so these spikes in debt service. And that's how it was, quite frankly, I think how it was sold and supported, because no one knew how to pay for it. So that was the method we found that we could pay for it and manage our debt service, and so town meeting has bought into the fact that we're doing all this within the capital plan without any debt exclusions, right? Really unusual stuff. Not a lot of projects like this. It was successful. We also recognized that we needed we have some other buildings we didn't get to, right? That's what, I don't care what you want to call it. What do we want to call it? Facility master plan 2, we can do it with the number 2, we can do it with 2 eyes, whatever you want to call it. The idea was to revisit, yes, whatever you want to call it. The idea was to revisit this and look at the buildings that hadn't otherwise been touched. The general concept of this, though, is that we wouldn't include in any facility master plan within an operating or within a capital budget, which otherwise sort of blows up the sort of methodology of being able to pay for it. So a real obvious example is the middle school. The middle school needs renovation expansion. I have said it publicly, the school superintendent said it publicly, the school committee, it does. And when that project moves forward, whatever that number is, 20 or 30 million, that's gonna require debt exclusion. It cannot fit in this plan and honor all those things we've talked about managing our money well. It's too big enough. And so that'll require its own sort of process. So facility master plan 2 is picking up the pieces, a little bit of the pieces left over. So we know we have a second fire station, we know it's a 1970s construction, it'll need some level of work, it's not a rebuild, it's not new, it's a renovation project, it's important, but it's a fairly straightforward renovation. Windows, maybe a minor expansion heading to it, but not of any kind of, it's an important renovation project. We also know that the youth center probably will need some modernization, although generally we're maintaining it pretty well. And there's some sort of discussion out there with a study that's being done to see if we should be offering some additional programs. And I think if we do offer some additional programs, again, we may have a modest addition to that. I don't expect it to be this massive rebuild. But those are 7-figure projects. I think renovations in the public environment. One day I'd like to build something in a private environment, but in the public environment it's very expensive. That leaves the school projects, and I think it'll really largely depend on the value of that. I've seen various numbers. The report talked about 10 million. If 10 million escalates to 15 or 20 million, you get into a different discussion. If at that point you're going to look forward to a middle school and a debt exclusion, do you roll those pieces together? You do it as one project. You talk about all the work being done at once. That's possible. So I think facility master plan is built into the 19 to 23 budget to begin this discussion. But it's certainly, because it only covers 5 years, that's a 10-year conversation. If we start in 21-ish, in this project, then the way we do things, it's gonna take us to 25 or 26 or 27 to complete that. So that's also part of the conversation. Are we willing to wait X amount of time to complete that work? It would seem to me, I think I said in the 5-year forecast last night, that I would expect that the middle school, when we get approval from the state, that because they're gonna partner with us on that, they provide a level of reimbursement. when we get approval for that, I don't know if it's gonna be this year, we're gonna hear in about a week or so, if not, we'll try again next year. I think that's gonna be a debt exclusion product, and the community will have to decide if it wants it. And then there'll be another conversation about whether or not the other pieces of that should be included in that conversation. I'll let other people sort of engage when they think they should.
And when you say other pieces, we're talking about the elementary school renovations for the empty classrooms, correct?
They're not just the empty classrooms, because the empty
Well,
classrooms.
it's gonna affect the
there's
whole
a-
infrastructure. I mean-
There's a series of projects within the elementary schools identified by that report, but they weren't to the empty classrooms. They were just general renovations, that were put in at about $10 million. Again, with the cost escalation, I don't know what that number is really gonna be. So the question would be, do we put it into a facility master plan and realize that the third one of those probably doesn't happen to 2026? Because we don't put them all in 1 year, right? Or is there a different conversation at the time that the middle school is approved?
Who has that conversation about the finances around that and kind of staging them out and tranching them? Is that a conversation you have with the school committee and the superintendent, selectmen? Like, how does this bounce around?
Which way? Like, in terms of the ordering of projects?
Yeah.
Sequencing
And
them?
the sequencing and timing.
Well, the timing is simply, to me, it's a financial calculation. So the capital improvement plan under the charter is the town manager's responsibility. So, I get together with my staff and I look at the effect on debt service, and I try to figure out how it works. So if I start this project, facility master plan in fiscal 19, we can't afford it, so it's not in there. So we sequence. It goes to Thomas's questions about, how do we do these things? Well, it's, not every decision feels exactly right, because we'd like to do it all at once. And so the charter assigns me the responsibility of setting those priorities, and it assigns this group and the selectmen and town meeting to decide if they think I'm right. Right, that's how it works. And so we consider a lot of factors when doing that, but it's a balance, right? How do I balance the interests of the school department versus public safety departments? Talk about this more strategy than sound business. The Kittredge gym came first. Why? Because they went 40 years without a gym. But to some people, they sit there and say, the Kittredge gym came first. We had another building falling down. But they lived 40 years. So is that is there an equation that led me there? There was not an equation. I would do it again, but there was not an equation that sort of led me there. And so some of it's a little bit of that, but it's matching debt service, what the expectations are, what we can pay, making sure debt service doesn't climb, and balancing all that. And so.
I'm just gonna ask it, and you can look.
You can ask whatever you like.
Yes, well, I ask it because I know you're
I'll
gonna
give
talk
her a
about
look.
it. Yeah, just please give me the look, I know. I know in a couple weeks you're gonna present the capital improvement. Could we hypothetically expect to see something for 19 for improvements to the elementary school?
Absolutely not. You won't see the beginning of the elementary school improvements because the facility master plan 1 isn't even done. It won't be done until probably the last project being the senior center won't come online until, I'm picking dates, 2020 or 21. Facility master plan 2, I think we may have, I'm recollecting, so I'm not
No,
trying to avoid
it's
your question,
okay.
I'm trying to recollect. Hold on, I get to read back to that piece of paper.
When is?
I would expect that 23 is the first, if you're asking specifically about elementary projects, 23.
So is it fair to say that those classrooms that will be empty when the kindergarten moves will stay empty?
My confusion is you're connecting capital with operational.
Well, that's what I'm trying to get through here.
Well,
That's what I'm trying
but
to.
those are two different questions.
Okay.
So the operational question is, when are you gonna put a teacher in a classroom?
Right.
The capital question is, the other renovations which are not assigned to those vacant spaces, when are the other improvements that may have been identified by the study in various elementary schools gonna be done? Those are two different questions.
Okay, but I know that they wanna put one classroom per grade on. Like, the idea is when the classrooms are emptied and the kindergarten moves, they wanted to do one classroom per grade. So that means 5 classrooms per elementary school will be spread among one each grade. There's not 5 rooms to put 5 teachers in to give one extra classroom per grade. And that's where I'm doing the math from what we're.
Well, if you're talking about the math as in terms of, so the school committee set a goal of 22 students per elementary classroom. That goal was set several years ago.
Yes.
In 2013, if I can recollect correctly, 53% of all classrooms did not meet that goal. That number went to 40%, 29%, and this year, through even a 3.65%, that number is down to 18.3%.
Yes.
So we've reduced the number of classrooms that are above 22 students per classroom from 53% 4 years ago, to a 19 what will be no higher than 18%. I would fully expect that within 1 or 2 budget years, that'll be every classroom will meet the school committee goal of.
Okay, so we don't have to wait to renovate to then fill the classrooms, that's what I
No, no, no.
thought, that's why I'm asking
No,
this.
just put a
Okay,
teacher.
thank you.
But the teachers cost money, I don't mean to just put a teacher.
No, I-
But yes, we
Got it.
will, that the goal was.
I thought we had to renovate first to then
Right.
fill the classrooms.
No, I think there was, part of that other discussion about what needs to be done in the other buildings, I think is gonna evolve personally, because that study was about classroom comparison. It was
Yes.
about, do I add classrooms to the back of, you know, the Atkinson, how do I do that stuff?
Yeah.
I think the conversation about what's gonna be necessary at the other elementary schools, I personally believe it's gonna evolve, because the discussion centered really around classroom spaces. We solved that problem when we built a 16 classroom kindergarten building that's gonna open in May.
Yeah.
We freed up 16 classrooms in the elementary schools.
Absolutely.
And simply by doing that, and slowly or incrementally to the question of
Yes.
incrementally growing and not getting too impatient, every teacher we add to those classrooms means the average goes down.
Okay.
And so I think budgetarily, will that begin in 19? Yes, we will go from 29% of all classrooms at the elementary level to 18.3% of all classrooms at the elementary level will be at 22 or below. Every kindergarten will be at 22 at the time we open the building, and currently they're not all at 22. And so we'll go from 29 to 18. If somehow we're capable within the 365 to squeeze a second teacher, that number will drop to 14%. And so I would expect, picking a number, fiscal '21, we will be at goal, that every classroom will have met the school committee goal, and that the average classroom size in the elementary could be as low as 19.6, which is the statewide average.
Thank you.
Does that help?
We have one or
Yes.
two more questions, because it's been a good hour and a half with our gentlemen.
It's been a great hour.
Yeah.
It's not been good.
It's been very educational, thank you.
Well, we'll tell Mom you were here.
Where's the report that you were talking about regarding the recommended capital improvements to the elementary schools? I'm assuming that's online somewhere.
It is, I actually,
have it?
I called it up, because questions were being asked about the cost and things, and so,
So
it's there.
It's
right.
there, okay.
Is it on the
Exactly.
school's website or
I was
ours?
just trying to figure out
It's on
where.
the- on the school
It's on the
website.
school website.
Okay.
And initially, it was closer to $20 million packet, but the modular version brought it down to 16.2.
Something, right?
Yeah, so,
I think if you get into the numbers like that, I
Oh,
just
yeah.
don't think it's gonna be able to carry on a traditional. Our debt service is growing too fast, especially with the kinds of changes, that we're not gonna be able to carry 16 million of additional debt beyond what we've already done. I think that's why I'm introducing the fact that we may not be able to go in the traditional.
Mhm.
I have one more question.
Yeah, sure.
Looking back, so we're 6 months into the 2018.
Yes.
Any surprises?
No, I think generally good. No, I think
On
we've,
track?
I think one of the things we really have done is to try to make decisions through, I don't like surprises, you know. So I think we've done a pretty good job of making sure we prepare for some of those things. If we get snow on the weekend, that's a surprise, you know. It's not, you can't stand snow anymore. So snow can be a little bit of a surprise, but I think everything, talking to the superintendent every week, they seem to be tracking pretty well on things like special education. I think they're tracking extraordinarily well on the new curriculum fund that we created last year. And so I think we're tracking pretty well. We've got overtime can be a little bit of a bogey for us, and we're tracking that currently on the fire side, but not anything that is stopping the ship. Yeah, pretty good generally.
Okay. What's with that?
Too quiet out.
Challenge.
It's snow, lots of
So
snow.
we'll get there another day. So can I have one more piece of the school, because I think it's helpful. There's been a lot of conversation when we did the kindergarten about the impact in a positive way on the average classroom size. There's some interesting data although I'm pretty good at recalling figures, I will forget some of these. The impact of vacating those particular classrooms in the short term in the elementary has a collateral benefit to each of those school districts. All the support staffs, the specialists, the nurses, and others now will see, on average, 10, 20, 30, 40 less students in the group of people that they otherwise serve. So in the immediate benefit when we open the kindergarten, we're gonna, again, create this equity, it's 22 kids per classroom, state-of-the-art space, linking it to the Early Childhood Center, all those things. And simultaneously, by removing those 300 and some odd students from those elementary schools, we will reduce the impact of specialist services that currently exist in the elementaries from day one. It's not something we talk a lot about, but for all of those professionals who support students, they will have less students to support. And I think it's a collateral benefit that, we often talk about average classroom size, but it's one of those things that there's some data on it, I'll forward you, that it's pretty significant numbers that we're.
We're interested in that. Absolutely.
Pretty interesting stuff.
Anything else?
Thank you.
You know, Eric, you didn't have the point on any particular part of the conversation, but the fact that you were here with Andrew on the 5-year forecast, you did add the value. That was beneficial. Thank you very much. Next time, don't bring your boss.
You brought me.
I was, so two quick things. One is, first and foremost, you guys have been great, you've always been great. I appreciate the candid conversation. There's no question that can't be asked. I may give you a face too.
No, sometimes I feel very stupid, so
But it's not, no, I
apologize.
apologize, and I don't mean to do that. But, it's, all of this conversation, we were kidding last week with someone who's, will be here 6 years next week. And the conversation was, everybody believed that somewhere in town hall was this bag of money, right? And I know it's a metaphor,
Under his desk.
but I didn't find it when I arrived. But the fairness is that the goal is to give you all the information you have. Sometimes you're not gonna be happy with what we have to say, sometimes we'll probably disagree in approach, we may. But in the end of the day, if you have all the information, at least the entire community is having an honest conversation about how to proceed. And in the end, that's good for all of us. And two, people like Eric. Eric spends more time than he gave himself credit for on making sure that our businesses feel good about this town. I think is as important as to encourage businesses to come here. Eric and his staff do a fantastic job of making sure they're available to businesses when there's questions, comments, and concerns. Because keeping those people that are here is really important to us. So
Absolutely.
he and his team deserve great credit for that.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
And I'll bring him next time.
Bring your mom.
I will.
Lock your office.
Christmas gift.
See you soon.
And a Christmas gift. We're gonna talk about Christmas on the way home now. Great, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Call it your mom.
On the way home, tell them. I don't have a choice. I think that was a choice.
Thank you.
Moving on a little bit out of order here. Just, I want to put a nail in the revenue fixed cost committee projections that Liz and I worked on. You actually heard some of the output of this stuff already. And there is a lot of conservatism that goes into it. And in a way, this is my second time on the committee, and it's no surprise. If anything, I start doing things, they give us some information about where are we in the current numbers or projections. And you extrapolate it times 4 because only a quarter of the year's gone by, and you say, whoa, we're got some trouble. And they go, no, all this stuff happens in a particular period of time, so you're not getting it now, you'll get it later. An example is workers' comp. Was workers' comp?
No, it's unemployment.
Unemployment insurance.
Because they laid off all the,
Teachers,
22
and
people.
Yeah.
these are the kind of questions, even though they're not revenue or necessarily fixed costs looking at 19, we ask those questions because it could impact those years. And the point that was made for that was that the people that were laid off at the very beginning of the new fiscal year, July 1,
Yeah.
they were close reaching the end of that period of unemployment insurance. And so that was sort of planned, the spending was, burn was proper, and they expected that to drop off. So those are the kind of things that these guys are managing and tailoring. And to echo what Andrew said, I didn't see any surprises in the revenue projections for the current year or for the fiscal year 19. Again, they're conservative. And it begs the question, what are you gonna do with all that excess money you're gonna get from building permits? But he's right, capital improvement, retained earnings.
Debt pay down.
We probably, I'm sure everyone thought about this, probably woke up in the middle of the night thinking about, gee, should I be a member of the OPEB committee? I know I tossed and turned for the last few weeks. I'm gonna ask the people at the table, I should have polled you before individually, is there any interest at all in selling, it's a very, how many times have you met, John?
None so far.
So it's one of those meetings, things that it's really an educational thing that you add, that you really be, for yourself, will be learning something about the process, about the OPEB issue, and as far as recommendations, you'll be part of the town meeting, probably there's some sort of review or report, I can see that happening already, if not, by someone else, by that committee, we'll put it in ours. So, is anyone interested in joining the OPEB? I have no idea when the meetings are.
I thought you were on the school committee on it. No, we have to have two
Yeah,
people now.
I am, but they
Slash,
need an
last meeting we
alternate.
discussed it.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's good.
Who's it from the school committee? I don't know, off the top of my head.
So we know it's Chris and Regina, Chuck and somebody to be named.
And we have a couple
Who
people.
from the town?
We have 2 or 3 people from Rhode Island. Lynn Savage is from the town, I believe, and I
When
think
do
there's.
they meet?
That's good.
They haven't decided yet.
I'm
Yeah,
not
you don't know who's
I'm
in
not
the school.
interested, so just to ruin myself.
Isn't it your thing?
My
I mean, to
thing?
put you on the spot, that you're, yeah.
No,
Oh,
are you kidding?
I thought you were really into that,
Okay.
into the diving in. Didn't you dive in last year when we
Oh,
could-
I wouldn't do that with the, you know, with the.
Employee
the
bargaining.
labor contract.
The labor
but,
contracts.
This one isn't my thing.
Isn't your thing, sorry. Didn't
OPEB
mean
is
to put you
driven
in-
by retirement costs, right?
It's the other,
Salary,
other
pensions,
post-employment
health.
benefits, such as healthcare.
So what can we do about that?
Don't get diabetes.
It's
That's the number one.
So
thing.
who brought the chalk, really? Oh my god.
So,
It's the idea of just being a
That's
little more
actually a bad
proactive.
correlation, it's not true.
It's about being
Sorry.
more proactive and understanding what our
But
options
I think
are.
everybody knows we have everyone has an unfunded liability, but, I mean, I didn't want to get into it tonight because it was getting late, but what can we really do about it?
well, that's a good question, and I don't know, and that's the whole purpose of this
That's
committee.
what this committee is about,
about-
because this is a
it is.
generational issue. This is not something to solve for this year's budget or.
We've never taken a close look
Next
at
So
it.
if anything, you say, woo, I know what I'm doing, I'm moving out of state.
I think this is very interesting, and if it's only a couple meetings, my problem is with my travel. I hate to commit to stuff, but if
Well,
someone
that's,
wants to
I'm
do it.
having the same problem, but if you and I wanna piggyback and go flex time, the problem is we're gonna miss something. Like, there's gonna be at least one meeting I'm gonna miss.
I think it's a pretty interesting subject. I wonder if it's, what's the goal of the committee? Because I know
Goal is-
most of it's the state, under the state's control.
Right, so the goal is,
No,
how can you?
That's not true.
No?
No,
It's-
it's a regional fund.
Yes.
Right, well, that's,
So, and, you know, you can decide how much you pay in, and,
Or set
as a
aside
group,
for.
of course, you know, so there's a lot
Do
of
we have a
things you can do.
reserves for that?
Oh, right.
A lot of
So-
moving parts to that, and
Small.
you might be struck by
Right.
one of their eureka moments,
I think I'm gonna have
So Ed?
where you've got,
You wanna
you
do
know,
it?
you
to.
know where.
I'll do it.
well,
Maybe
working in a
have-
large corporation, I know how they
Chuck's looking at me
scale
like,
back over
"Really?"
the years, so some of the things that have
But
been
I'm gonna be
tried and
learning.
tested in the private
Yeah.
sector.
What you know,
haven't
and
been
I'm
applied
not
in the
as
public
quick on the
sector.
numbers, but,
Yeah, but you
I'll put
may,
you down.
yeah, put me
you may
down.
have
Do you
an
not
insight
wanna do it?
that may-
No, I do, but we have to do the school meeting. We're going to school meetings.
So
We
I'll ask Chris for a lockdown schedule, and between the two of you guys, between Ed and Jen, I will send that out to you, and I'll get Chris to lock it down.
That way, you know, the rest of the people in the town that do.
Oh, we're going to the January
Other
meeting.
people.
It's on
work
that
with
piece
them
of
and
paper.
That's
be
the truth.
doing some
Just that one.
strategy, brainstorming, reading stuff.
Yeah, let's just do that quickly. You guys wanna pull out the calendar? Angela printed it out. I handed it to you. I did pass them out.
Yeah.
I crossed out December 12th, we're not
Have
meeting,
questions about it.
Okay, not meeting.
not meeting. January 4th, Sasha and me, or just me, will attend when the superintendent submits the budget to the school committee. And I think we're doing that because we wanted to get our hands on it before our meeting on the 9th and hear it from you.
Also too, I'll be candid with you, there is something called a visual. When they see a couple members, as I see Stan in our room, I'm serious, Stan, I say it, shows an interest by,
Such a large part of our.
especially since he says it's 50%, but reality, it's more than 50% of the town's budget. When they add in all the things that we don't charge back. But Stan actually started this as part of his school committee when he was on the meeting, where he would attend other meetings, in his way of actually cross communication.
Exactly.
And making sure that people knew that you were interested, and I applaud both Jen and Sasha for attending on 4th, so.
Give us a pat on the 5th, on the moon.
I broke down many.
I already had 3, so I'm sick.
So, okay.
I'm trying to be
So-
subtle about it,
More
but
about
you know,
meetings?
it's not working.
Hey, guys, I guess the question is, there's no question, we're just gonna stick with this schedule.
Yep.
If we have to flex for any reason, we will flex and come back to our group here. But in the meantime, pencil them all out,
Agree.
okay? As you plan ahead for
And when
travel.
did you have the joint meeting?
The joint meeting is, the 15th, February 15th.
Is that our schedule, or is that their schedule? Or is that Milton's schedule?
Yeah.
Because they typically meet on a Monday, right?
Yeah, they meet on a Monday, we meet on a Tuesday, and why did I not say, because we're already meeting on a Tuesday to do the operating budget and vote on the capital improvement plan. So we needed time to look at the operating budget together.
Let me talk with,
We can't do it any time before then.
no, so let me talk with,
And they have to vote on it by the 26th, that's why we squeezed it in. The selectmen have to vote on the operating budget by the 26th, so we thought meeting them before they have to vote, but 2 days after we receive it, was the best we could do.
yeah, they may not want to.
We just have a meeting on Thursday.
I appreciate that they may not, but our Tuesday is when we're gonna first receive the operating budget to review.
It's on a Thursday.
And they receive it the day before, so
And
that's not.
they approve it on the 26th.
Yeah, and the reason it's so
It's a
tight is
Thursday.
we have school break in between.
meeting?
If we didn't have
Yeah,
school break,
that's
we'd
just the
have
name
more
of it.
time.
Oh, so that's
Oh,
another
it's not a
joint.
joint, yeah, that's the location.
We do what we
Tuesday and
do.
Thursday,
Um,
the same week.
Alright, that's what I thought when I
Yeah.
heard the second.
What's
What's
that?
It's the same week we have 2 meetings,
Yes,
February.
yes, and then we explained that because the following week is school break. And then the following week is when the selectmen have to vote on the operating budget. So we really unfortunately have a 1-week window to receive, discuss, have their required meeting with them, and then we come back after break and they all have to vote through it.
they vote, we still
We have
review.
still time, but
We
they
still
vote.
But that's not, in the past, even though it's required by the charter,
Yeah, why don't we have to
We've never
vote?
done it.
it's not been done. So we're gonna make an attempt, there's a different crowd on the selectmen, board of
Better
select people.
appetite to do it.
So, yep. I like what you've got here, and I'll
You
check.
know, why don't we have to vote on the operating budget? Only the selectmen do? We
Right.
vote on the 6th. Oh, we have an extra week. Okay, sorry.
Approval of minutes? This was the cannabis discussion.
I love getting them ahead of time, linked to the agenda. Very
And I
helpful,
did-
I read them this afternoon.
And it was easy to sign up, folks,
Yeah.
even though I've done it a few times. Now I've got a confirmation to sign up for agendas. So, I'm getting flooded too, but you know what, it's easy to delete.
It's great.
Yeah.
Just quick look and.
You have to learn how to build folders so I can start saving.
You could.
Yeah, but it was
You know what,
3-4 days
I'm
I
not
had to
saving
figure it
school and others unless there's something I wanna bring up here.
Right.
So it's more about, yeah, I know.
Move to approve the minutes.
I'll second the approval.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any public comment?
In that, last discussion with Dan Leary, I was asking about the financial health and stability and sources and uses for the, project sponsors. And, in the intervening time between, they reached out to me, and I'm gonna meet with them one-on-one to go over, you know, if they have $5 billion in debt and no cash, would you still approve the project?
No.
No. We don't know that. I don't have any
I
reason
think
to
that-
believe that they're not in.
My mouth's open like a bird, this
perfect
is really
financial
great,
health.
thanks.
But, I may end up signing an NDA and just getting a confidential view of the finances behind the project, because they need to plan for worst-case scenario, putting more money in this than they expect, not best-case scenario, so,
The philosophy here.
just FYI.
Thank you.
I'll-
That's great.
I'll probably report back by our next meeting.
Could you? Thank you. Stan, any words?
Well, okay, okay. Two things.
Oh.
One is.
This is Stan Lippert from.
Oh,
yes.
43 Stone Creek Road is the
That's right.
official driveway.
You haven't moved?
Yeah, I've
Don't move, you'll confuse
I
everybody.
will be so
Please don't.
confused, right, so confused. Yeah, you can't change your cell phone number or your address, right? That's kind of stupid. A couple of things I would just add as footnotes. I don't know why revenue and fixed cost is so rational these days, because in the old days, everybody's budget always started out very low. So the revenue and fixed costs met, they came up with numbers, the town manager handed them all out, and the school department would typically start with 1%. It would be like, what? Let's even cover our normal escalation that we can't even do.
Right.
You know, so then we'd spend months arguing with the town manager and finally eke out enough money to make everything fit in the end. I don't know how that revenue and fixed cost process didn't work and this one does. I can't explain it. But I would echo the town manager's comment, which is he's completely rationalized all of this. So I think everybody feels like they know what the numbers are.
Yes.
So you get the numbers, you get a fair set of numbers, everybody's dealt with fairly. And so I think that's made a big change. The only thing that is amazing to me is, you know, I love going to school with this guy, because every time I listen to him, I always learn a whole bunch of new stuff I didn't know before about municipal finance and all kinds of things. We should be so grateful we have him, and he's made all of this possible.
I agree. And I think the answer to your question, I'll say it a little bit different. The answer is the same for both of your observations. It is it's the change in leadership, it's the change in how people interact with one another. There is no gamemanship playing, there's a fairness standard being used, and everyone appreciates that. And I've noticed that over my several years being on the FinCom board, so as well as just being in the town environment.
You know, to everyone's credit, all the other departments, the school committee, nobody tries to break the game.
Right.
Right? Everybody's decided they're gonna participate because it's fair, and they don't try to screw it up. So that makes it work. So they all have to participate and cooperate to make that work, and they have been doing that for years now, so that's part of that process too.
I agree. Stan, again, thank you for coming.
Yeah.
I do appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me here.
Any other matters? I want to publicly thank Angela.
Public
Thank you.
thanks for
Thank
being
you.
here.
Yeah, thanks for
And the other thing, because we are public as well, I want to publicly thank the school committee for selecting a great superintendent in Greg Gilligan, so way to go. Do I have a motion?
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great, guys. Good meeting.
Are we being recorded today?